Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Ruth Ibegbuna, the founder and former CEO of Reclaim, a Manchester-based program with a focus on working-class young people being seen, being heard, and leading change. Prior to this, she was a teacher in a South Manchester state school. Could you talk a little bit about your work on the Reclaim project?
Hello, I can do that, yes. Reclaim is a project that I set up, how long ago now? 11 years ago. I was a teacher, and it was a project that helped disadvantaged young people fulfill their leadership potential. So to get young people from areas of disadvantage to believe that they could change themselves and change the world, to work with them and put them in places where you might not expect to see them. So in politics, in the media, in the law, in the police, really to try and diversify who gets to be in those leadership positions.
What kinds of barriers are the young people Reclaim works with facing?
Mainly poverty. At the end of the day, the fact is they don't have money and they don't have access to networks. So quite often, if you don't have access to networks, you haven't got people to give you work experience, you haven't got people to give you mentoring and guidance and support. So a lot of the stuff that we do at Reclaim is about providing those adults who are safe, who can help guide you and shape you through your life path.
How does Reclaim help young people overcome them and realize their full potential?
The first and most important thing that Reclaim does is it makes young people realise that they're worth something, that leadership isn't for other children and other young people, that it can be for everyone and it's universal. I think it encourages young people to believe that they have the right to be seen and heard, and not to stand back as spectators, but to try and get involved in change.
If the end goal is large-scale change in society and in its leadership, how important is it to you young working people are a part of this process?
It's hugely important because I believe in diversity and I believe that inclusion is important. So not just kind of what a person looks like or their gender or their sexuality, but also, their race, but also their social class. It's no good if you only have people who are the richest and most successful people in society leading others. Diversity of opinion and diversity of thought means you need to allow new faces in.
I feel I hear a lot of people talking in the news, etc., about young people not being political, but I look around at my age and feel the opposite. Do you think young people are disengaged?
No, I don't think young people are disengaged at all. I think that what the adults are doing is creating ways in which young people are kept out of decision making. So we allow young people to have viewpoints on a low level. So when I was a teacher, for example, young people could make viewpoints about what we should eat in the school canteen. They could make decisions about things that weren't that important. But actually, when you got young people who were complaining about the fact that one of their teachers wasn't performing in class, ignored. So for me, it's about how much do we respect young people's voices and opinions. If we really respect them, why are they not allowed in those top rooms where real change happens?
Many of the issues being spoken about right now will affect young people the most. Do you think adults in leadership positions need to take what young people are saying more seriously?
100% yes. I think young people, it's there in the word, they're young people. They're not a different species to us, They're saying what needs to be said, but from a youth perspective, and they are the experts in their own lives. So no one understands better what it's like to be a young person than a young person. My experience as a 42-year-old woman is not that of a young person. I don't know what it's like to be a young person anymore. If I want to find out, I'm going to speak to a young person. And there's just a sense that adults feel that they know best, and they don't know best about being a young person.
What needs to happen to close the attainment and opportunity gaps between different social classes?
That's a really good question. The problem is, if you've got young people from very different backgrounds, going to very different schools, having very different levels of support, there's always going to be that division. And unfortunately, there's not enough effort going into ensuring that all children get an incredible education. Some children get an incredible education, and not just in private schools. There's some incredible state schools out there, but some children get a terrible education. And some children have their education backed up with support at home. So when I was growing up, my parents would read to me, my parents would help educate me when the school had closed. That's not what every child gets. So we need to ensure that young people are having a rounded education to give them a fair start in life.
You talk a lot about the statistic of the 19 of the 54 prime ministers to date having gone to Eton. What kinds of problems arise from having a leadership which doesn't represent the working class proportionally? Do you think the government is out of touch?
Brilliant question. I think it's unhealthy for democracy. I think that to have a narrow band of people dictating the outcome for people that they don't know, have never met, often don't have much empathy for, I feel that's really, really unhealthy for democracy. And one school can't produce the talent that a country needs, especially one school that is kept quite remote and quite separate from the rest of the population. So for me, I'm not saying let's not have people from Eton lead the country. I'm saying let's have them lead it alongside people who've got real lived experience of an alternative life. Why is a life at Eton worth more than a life in a state school or from an underprivileged background? And the idea that people who've been to one of the most expensive schools in the world know what life is like for a single mother who's struggling, it's just, to me, it's a ridiculous system. And there needs to be room for those people, but they need to open the doors wider and let other people in to challenge the fact that they are the status quo. I love that question, thank you.
Do you think the government is doing a disservice to working class young people?
I think the government is often disinterested in working class young people because, unfortunately, a lot of working class young people don't vote. And if they don't vote, they're democratically insignificant. And politicians only care about you if you vote. So the biggest thing that should happen is that working class young people need to understand that if they want to wield some power, they've got to engage in the democratic process more.
Why do you think working class young people don't vote?
Because I think they are not educated about politics, which I think is a key thing. There's no critical tuition and thinking that is often in their communities. And also, I think they look at the politicians and think they don't speak for me. They feel very removed and disconnected from what those politicians are doing. So they look at the choice of politicians that are out there and think, well, there's not much difference between them. I'm just not going to engage in this process.
Reclaim has the goal of ending leadership inequality within a generation. What would you say to someone who said this was too ambitious?
I'd say they're probably right. But it's important to start with vision. And realism doesn't fire people up. You know, if Martin Luther King had stood there saying, you know, I have a strategic thought rather than I have a dream, I don't know how many people would have marched with him and stood with him. And it's important to have an ambitious goal and a dream and a vision. If you don't get there, then yes, you can reshape it. But a vision is not the same as a plan.
You grew up in Bradford. In more recent years, people have been talking of a new northern powerhouse. Do you think any progress has been made in closing the gap between the north and south of England?
I never thought I'd be sat in Geneva talking about the northern powerhouse. First of all, I don't believe in the northern powerhouse. People talk about it. I think it's a myth. I think it's something said to stop the north from complaining too much about the fact that they're very disadvantaged and they don't get the amount of money that London and the south of the country gets. So I think the northern powerhouse is something that has been talked up, but in reality, when you go to the country and you see the deprivation in some parts outside of London, then you understand that it's just marketing.
Do you have a success story that you are most proud of since you created Reclaim?
I have a success story, and it's not my success, it's young people. It's young women who were victims of sexual abuse, who were on our programme, who years later turned it round, decided they were the experts in this issue, decided that they wanted to be the leaders, and started their own organisation to better train police and social workers and teachers and other young people on how to spot and prevent child sexual abuse. And these 4 women now are going around the country, really changing lives and really saving young people. For me, that's an outcome that changes everything.